My name is June Cartwright, and I'm 64 years old. I've lived alone for the past 7 years, ever since my husband, Harlan, passed away. Most days, my life is quiet. Slow mornings with coffee, evenings tending to the roses he once planted. That afternoon, I was in the kitchen taking an apple pie out of the oven, the one recipe Harlan always insisted smelled like home. I was humming softly when my phone buzzed on the counter. I swiped it open, expecting a message from the church group or my neighbor checking in. Instead, a voicemail icon blinked back at me. I pressed play, still wiping flour from my hands. The voice that filled the room stopped me cold. It was my son, Evan. He didn't know I was listening. The message was meant for his wife. His tone was sharp, impatient. She's dragging this out. The old hag just needs her final nap. Once she's gone, Paris is ours. My heart kicked hard in my chest. For a second, I thought I misheard. That maybe the words twisted themselves in the speaker. But then came Maya's soft laugh in the background, and his voice again, certain and cruel. The pie pan slipped against the stovetop with a clang. My breath came shallow, shaky, as if the air itself had turned on me. Evan, my boy who once picked me dandelions from the yard, who used to curl against my side when thunderstorms scared him, was plotting my end with the woman I'd welcomed into this family. I stood frozen, the kitchen clock ticking louder than ever, every second pressing into my ears. My palms went clammy, the phone still hot in my hand. That message wasn't just thoughtless words spoken in frustration. It was a plan, an intention, and suddenly I could hear every syllable like nails against glass. I replayed it twice, each time the meaning cutting deeper. And then something inside me shifted. The grief and disbelief gave way to something sharper, steadier. I remembered the folder Harlan had tucked away, labeled important documents, and the late-night conversations where he'd warned me, if they ever turn on you, June, be ready. I was ready, and that voicemail would be the beginning. The rest of that evening moved like a fog. I sat at the kitchen table long after the pie cooled, the voicemail replaying in my mind until every word felt carved into me. I could have confronted Evan right away, called him and demanded an explanation, but the anger was too raw. I needed clarity, not a shouting match. So instead, I pulled down the fireproof box Harlan and I had kept in the closet. The key, still hanging on the chain I wore around my neck, clicked open with a finality that steadied me. Inside lay the folder Harlan had labeled in his careful handwriting, Protection Plan. He had drafted it years ago, insisting that wealth and family could turn combustible when grief and temptation collided. I remembered teasing him for being too cautious. Now his foresight felt like salvation. I flipped through the documents, our living trust, the no contest clause, letters from his lawyer, Alicia Moreno. Each page was both a shield and a warning. I dialed Alicia's number, my hand trembling as I held the phone to my ear. She answered in her calm, deliberate tone, the same voice that had walked us through estate planning after Harlan's diagnosis. June, it's been a while. What's wrong? I told her everything, how Evan's voicemail landed in my inbox, what I'd heard, and how certain he had sounded. My voice cracked, but I forced myself to keep it steady. There was silence on the line. Then Alicia said, "You did the right thing calling me. Don't confront him yet. We'll proceed exactly as Harlan intended." Her words anchored me. She promised to review the documents, confirm the trust was locked down, and meet me the next day. Before we hung up, she added, "Keep that voicemail safe. It's more valuable than you realize." That night, I barely slept. Every creak of the house made me sit upright, listening. I hated myself for it. This was my home, my sanctuary. and suddenly I felt like a trespasser in my own life. I lay awake thinking about the little boy Evan once was, and the man he had become. By morning, I knew I couldn't avoid him for long. He would sense something had shifted. I brewed a pot of coffee, set out 2 plates, and cut slices of the apple pie. If he wanted to talk about my future, I would let him sit across from me and reveal exactly who he'd become. And when he arrived, I would not be caught unprepared. The doorbell rang mid-morning, sharp and insistent. I had already poured the coffee and laid out the pie, the plates waiting like props on a stage I never wished to perform on. When I opened the door, Evan stood there with his hands in his pockets, shifting his weight like a restless boy. Maya hovered behind him, her smile stretched too wide, too practiced. "Morning, Mom," he said, leaning in for a kiss on the cheek. His lips barely brushed my skin. I motioned them inside. "Coffee's ready. Pie too. Sit down." We gathered around the kitchen table. The pie looked beautiful on the plates, golden crust, cinnamon curling through the air, but it felt like poison sitting between us. I clasped my hands in my lap, forcing myself to stay calm. Evan spoke first. "Maya and I have been talking. We just want what's best for you. You've been alone too long. A retirement community could give you company, safety. You wouldn't have to worry about bills or maintenance." Maya nodded eagerly. "It's really lovely. June. They have events, excursions, even a book club. You'd love it." I let them finish, nodding as though I were considering their pitch. Then I reached for my phone, tapped the screen, and let Evan's voice fill the room. "She's dragging this out. The old hag just needs her final nap. Once she's gone, Paris is ours." The words echoed against the kitchen walls. Maya's smile dissolved. Evan's face drained of color. He shifted in his chair, eyes darting to the counter as if the phone might vanish. I stopped the recording. The silence that followed was heavier than any thunderstorm. "Is that your idea of what's best for me?" My voice came out steady, colder than I expected. Evan opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. "Mom, you weren't supposed..." "Supposed to what? To hear the truth?" I leaned forward, hands flat on the table. "Harlan prepared for this. The trust is sealed, and I've already spoken with Alicia. You won't get what you're after by manipulating me." Maya reached for Evan's arm, but he jerked away, his jaw tightening. Neither of them touched the pie. I rose from the table, collected their plates, and set them back on the counter. "You should leave now," I said quietly. "Before you say anything else you can't take back." They stood awkwardly, chairs scraping against the floor, and left without another word. The moment the door closed, my knees went weak. I had stood my ground, but the battle was only beginning. By the time I walked into Alicia Moreno's office the next afternoon, my stomach was knotted so tightly I could barely draw a full breath. The building smelled of old paper and polished wood, the kind of place where truth felt unavoidable. Alicia stood from behind her mahogany desk, her eyes kind but sharp with understanding. "June," she said warmly, guiding me to a leather chair. "You look like you haven't slept." "I haven't," I admitted, settling into the chair. "I need to know how far Harlan prepared for this, because Evan..." My throat caught. I pushed the phone across her desk. "You should hear it." She pressed play. Evan's voice spilled into the quiet office, every syllable hanging in the air like a knife suspended mid-strike. Alicia didn't flinch. She let the message run its course, then stopped it with a precise tap. Her gaze met mine. "This is serious, June." But Harlan anticipated the possibility of family pressure. He left instructions for me in case it ever came to this. She opened a locked drawer and retrieved a thick envelope sealed with Harlan's handwriting. My chest tightened at the sight of his familiar scrawl. She slid it toward me. I tore the seal carefully, as though the paper itself might crumble in my hands. Inside were 2 letters, one written to me and one to Alicia. I unfolded mine first. June. It began. If you're reading this, it means you've been placed in a position I feared might come. I trust you to be strong, but I wanted you to have the law on your side, how you are not alone. Tears blurred the ink. Alicia gently pulled the second letter from my hand and read aloud the portion addressed to her. Should my wife face undue influence, you are authorized to enact the secondary protection plan. The trust shall divert all contested assets to the Maple Harbor Education Fund. Additionally, June has authority to reveal the insurance policies I suspected Evan would pursue. She paused, looking at me. He wasn't wrong. From a file on her desk, she revealed copies of insurance documents. Evan had taken out a life insurance policy in my name without my knowledge, listing himself as beneficiary. He had signed paperwork declaring he was my primary caregiver. Worse still, the policy included a rider, double payout in case of accidental death. My stomach turned cold. So that voicemail, Paris wasn't just a dream. It was a plan with a price tag. Alicia nodded. But it's also a crime if he filed under false pretenses. We'll document everything. For now, keep calm. Don't confront him again until we're ready. I folded Harlan's letter against my chest, the paper trembling in my hands. My husband had been gone 7 years, and yet in this moment, he was here, shielding me still. The following afternoon, Alicia scheduled a meeting in her downtown office. The sun poured through tall windows, lighting the long oak conference table that seemed far too grand for the 4 of us. I sat at one end, Alicia at the other. Evan and Maya walked in first, followed by my daughter Lena and her husband, Trent. Evan tried for a casual smile, though his jaw flexed too tightly. "Mom, what's all this about?" Alicia gestured toward the chairs. "Please sit. This is an important conversation." They took their seats, tension humming in the air like static before a storm. Alicia slid a folder across the table, her voice even. "This is the life insurance policy Evan filed in June's name. He claimed caregiver status. There is also an accidental death rider that doubles the payout. These documents are questionable, to say the least." Lena gasped. "Evan, is that true?" His ears reddened. "Everyone does it. It's a safety net. For you, not for me." I cut in. My voice surprised me with its calm steel. "I heard your voicemail. Evan, I know what Paris means to you." Maya's lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. Trent sat back, arms crossed, his eyes calculating. Alicia continued. "Harlan anticipated this. His trust contains a protective clause. If undue influence is proven, all contested assets will be diverted to the Maple Harbor Education Fund. In other words, if anyone pressures June, you forfeit everything." The words landed with the weight of a gavel. I leaned forward, folding my hands. "Here is my condition. For the next 5 years, none of you will speak of money, inheritance, or what I choose to do with my life. 5 years of silence on that subject. If you can manage that, there may still be something left for you. If not, it all goes to charity." The room froze. Evan's knuckles whitened against the table. 5 years? That's insane. "It's protection," I said. "It's the line between love and greed. If you love me, prove it." Lena's eyes filled with tears, though she said nothing. Maya stared at the tablecloth. Trent muttered under his breath. "So all this planning for nothing?" I pushed my chair back slowly. "This isn't a negotiation. It's a boundary. Break it, and you'll have nothing but memories of me." Silence stretched, heavy and unbroken. Finally, Alicia gathered the papers, her tone final. "The terms are clear. I'll be documenting today's meeting. When I rose, my legs trembled, but I walked out with my head high. Behind me, their voices rose in argument, already cracking under the weight of what had just been laid before them. The days after that meeting felt lighter, as though a door had been cracked open to let in air I hadn't realized I was missing. For the first time in years, I let myself say yes to things that had nothing to do with survival. I signed up for an Italian cooking class at the community center. On Tuesdays, I walked to the shelter to help with the cats and dogs waiting for homes. I even joined a small dinner group that met every Friday at Dockside Diner, where the servers knew my name and always brought extra lemon for my tea. One Friday evening, as I slid my card across the check to pay for the group's meal, I caught myself smiling. It wasn't just about footing the bill, it was about reclaiming a piece of who I was, independent and capable. For a while, I allowed myself to believe that the shadow of betrayal had passed, but shadows rarely vanish so easily. Early one morning, Mrs. Pruitt, my 70-year-old neighbor who kept watch over the whole block from her porch swing, stopped by. She carried a basket of muffins and spoke in a hushed voice. "June, I don't mean to stir trouble, but I saw Evan and Maya leaving your house the other day. It was just after sunrise. They looked rattled. Were they supposed to be there?" I shook my head. "I haven't invited them in weeks." Mrs. Pruitt pressed her lips tight. "Then you should know. They didn't look like family stopping by for coffee. They looked like people sneaking away." Her words tightened something deep in my chest. I thanked her, sent her home with the basket lighter by half, and stood at my front window long after she left. That same afternoon, another reminder surfaced. An email pinged into my inbox. Confirmation for a hotel booking in Paris. The message had been copied to me by mistake, the sender autofilling my address from an old travel arrangement I'd once helped Maya with. There it was, in black and white. Dates, reservations. Her name listed alongside Evan's. The pieced-together plan I thought I had crushed was still alive, beating quietly beneath the surface. It was a gray Saturday when the knock came. I hadn't been expecting anyone, and the sight of Lena and her husband, Trent, on my porch set every nerve on edge. Lena carried a casserole dish, her smile too bright for the dreary morning. "We thought we'd surprise you." "Mom," she said, pushing past me before I could answer. Trent followed, setting the dish down on the counter with a thud. I forced a polite smile. "You could have called first." Lena waved off my words. "We just wanted to check on you. See how you're doing." Her voice trembled at the edges, as though rehearsed. I motioned them to the table. Then, while their backs were turned, I tapped my phone's screen and slid it onto the counter, recording. Maine was a one-party consent state. I knew my rights. Trent poured himself coffee without asking. "You're really planning to travel alone? Edinburgh, wasn't it?" I froze. "Yes." "Why?" He leaned back, giving a low chuckle. "Just seems risky at your age. Flights, hotels, strange streets. Anything could happen." Lena placed a hand on his arm, but her eyes flicked nervously to me. "What he means is, we worry. If something were to happen while you were abroad, no one would know until it was too late." The air between us thickened. They weren't talking about concern, they were planting the seed of accident. I folded my hands on the table, keeping my face still. "I appreciate your worry," I said softly, "but I can take care of myself." Lena's smile faltered. "Of course you can. Mom, we just want peace of mind." The phone continued to record, catching every veiled word, every careful inflection. An hour later, when they finally left, I locked the door and sagged against it, my chest heaving. Their casserole sat untouched on the counter, its glass lid fogging with steam. I couldn't bear to lift it. Not long after, Alicia called. June, the insurance documents arrived. Evan filed false information, claiming he lives with you and is your caregiver. That's insurance fraud. Coupled with any suggestion of harm, it becomes criminal conspiracy. I told her about Lena and Trent's visit, about the insinuations of danger abroad, and that I had it all on tape. Her silence was long, deliberate. Then she said, "Keep that recording safe. We're taking this further." I hung up, the casserole cooling in the kitchen like an omen. A week later, I sat once again at Alicia's conference table, but this time a man in a gray suit occupied the seat beside her. He introduced himself as Detective Harris from the Financial Crimes Division. His voice was calm, clipped, all business. Evan, Maya, Lena, and Trent filed in, their expressions strained. The detective wasted no time. "We've reviewed the insurance documents. Mr. Cartwright, you listed yourself as your mother's live-in caregiver. Records show otherwise. That constitutes fraud. Coupled with recordings provided by Mrs. Cartwright, there are grounds to open a full investigation." Evan shifted, his face blotchy with anger. "Mom, you can't do this. We're family." I steadied my hands on the table. "Family doesn't plot accidents or sign false papers. You left me no choice." Lena's eyes brimmed, her voice breaking. "We just wanted security." "No," I cut in, sharper than I intended. "You wanted control, and there's a difference." The detective slid a form across the table. "This is notice of investigation. You're not under arrest today, but this matter isn't going away." The silence that followed felt heavier than stone. Maya looked down, cheeks burning. Trent muttered under his breath, but no one listened. I leaned back, drawing in a breath that tasted freer than any I'd taken in months. Here is my boundary. 5 years without speaking of money. 5 years to prove you care about me. Not what I leave behind. Fail, and everything goes to charity. Evan's mouth twisted, but he said nothing. For the first time in a long while, I felt steady. My children's choices were their own, but mine was finally clear. 2 months later, I stood on the windswept hill of Arthur's Seat in Edinburgh. The city stretched out below in a patchwork of stone and green. The air smelled of rain and possibility. In my hands, I held a postcard, the front painted with thistles and rolling highlands. On the back, I wrote in careful script, "Harlan." I made it. I'm still standing. I'm free. I slipped it into my coat pocket, a letter to a man who would never read it, but whose foresight had saved me. That evening, back at the small inn where I was staying, my phone buzzed, a voicemail. Evan's voice, cracked and subdued, filled the room. "Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to go that far. Please forgive me." For a moment, I almost replayed it, but the words were hollow, empty of change. I pressed delete. The message vanished into silence. When I returned home weeks later, Alicia met me with news. The insurance company had voided the policy for fraud. The investigation was active, the paper trail too strong to ignore. Whatever happened next was no longer mine to control. Instead, I focused on what was. I signed the first check to the Maple Harbor Education Fund, Harlan's legacy reaching young hands. I brought home a gray kitten from the shelter, her purr like steady thunder against my chest. And one Sunday morning, I baked another apple pie, letting the smell of cinnamon and butter fill the house until it felt alive again. I no longer lived under suspicion, or fear, or betrayal. I lived for myself, and for the memory of the man who had believed in my strength all along. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy these family drama and revenge stories, please subscribe and join me for more every day.